Let's fix these anti-patterns we see in the code here. Anti-pattern. A-N-T-I-P-A-T-T-E-R-N. Anti-pattern. I came across the word anti-pattern relatively recently when I was learning React.js. React.js. If you haven't heard of React before, that's a whole other engineering word of the day. But it's basically a programming library for the web. It's relatively new too. It's like a new technology, a new library that people have built over the last several years that makes, in theory, makes building websites easier or better. Like it's a bunch of pre-built things where you don't have to design every little piece of code to do what you want to do. And you can still make a good website using React.js. And when I was learning React.js, apparently one of the justifications for it is that it, in theory, again, reduces the tendency for coders to design things really poorly. In other words, it could help prevent coding with anti-patterns. Anti-patterns are the opposite of good patterns. They're the opposite of good design patterns in programming, for example. Apparently, it was coined in 1995 by the computer programmer Andrew Koenig. And I'm not actually sure how to say that name. It might be Koenig, if you speak German. And he used that term, anti-pattern, to describe all sorts of very, very common coding practices that you might see in people's code that are horrible, that aren't great, that introduce so much opportunity for error. For example, spaghetti code. Have you heard of that? It's where all your code mixes together like spaghetti, and you can't see my hands, but I'm swirling them together like two fish dancing around each other. That's spaghetti code, where the inputs go into the outputs here, and you don't know what this does because it's one gigantic mess, and I don't know why this function is named that, and if anyone else looks at that code, you don't know, or they aren't going to know what's going on. If you look at that code a week later, you don't know what's going on. That is spaghetti code. It's a very common pattern that you see in coding that's horrible. That is an example of an anti-pattern. Another anti-pattern, if you Google this, you can totally go down the rabbit hole, is the God object. That's like my favorite phrase. The God object in programming is when you program this one object, this one function, or this one block of code that does everything, right? It has all the power. In theory, I mean, that could be great, right? You just have this one thing that opens your program, closes your program, saves all your stuff, analyzes all your data, communicates with the internet, tells you look good. Like, okay, fine. You have one object, this God object, all powerful that does everything. But this is a horrible design pattern because in practicality, an engineer is most likely to get confused in what things do. And maybe one function will mess with another function, and me opening this file will suddenly screw up the way it displays on this screen because I'm not separating things out. If I designed the God house, the house that does everything in my life for me, like, wouldn't that be awesome if you could design the perfect God house that not only housed you, let you in and out and gave you AC, but it also read to you, and it drove your kids to school, and it grew you food and sold your goods if you run a business. And your house not only did that, it cleaned for you and it taught you how to do math. Like, this is the God house. If someone designed that house, in theory, it's amazing, but in practice, it's horrible. Horrible. Don't ever do that because you need to separate out your systems a little bit. We have systems engineering for a reason. Make little compartments to handle certain things. Don't just make one giant box that does everything, because you're probably going to have when you open the door, it's going to mess up how it teaches you math. Or when you learn math from this house, it sends your kids to the grocery store instead of the school. You don't want those kinds of weird crosstalk and interactions. You need to separate out certain things. You don't want one giant object to do everything. That's my favorite anti-pattern. I like this word because I feel like, coming from a mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering background, anti-patterns can refer to bad design practices in general that we see a lot. And For example, the idea of that God object, it still applies in mechanical design. That's not always great. You want to have modularity or systems engineering and a breakdown of concerns to some degree. What are other common anti-patterns in engineering in general, in design? That's a good thing to think about. Also, it makes me think of education in engineering. When you teach someone how to do good design or good programming, oftentimes it's good to point out, hey, what does bad design or bad engineering look like? It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever done the exercise when you're learning how to write, like write a story or write in English, and you learn all these good practices by seeing good examples. Well, sometimes it's a good exercise to be like, all right, today we're gonna write badly. Let's just break all those conventions and rules. We're gonna make horrible writing right now. That's our fun exercise for the day. And people will use their bad grammar and bad syntax, write things out of order, and be totally vague while being overly specific about certain things. Like, it's a fun exercise to just play in the world of horrible design of words or design of stories in this case. But I think if you're teaching about engineering, it might be cool one day to just be like, all right, let's only use anti-patterns today. Let's make everything a God object and don't use any comments at all. And just put in new requirements every hour, right? Don't settle on any requirement. Just throw in whatever you want at any time. And it'd be kind of funny to just see what comes out of something like that. There's a great YouTube channel all about building bad robots, or at least it used to be. It's from Simone Gertz, someone who studied some electrical engineering, and she just rose to fame making bad robots. It's a celebration of anti-patterns, celebrating what is not great so that you can appreciate the good design patterns better. All right, I spoke a lot about this because I do like this word that I've learned recently. Anti-pattern is my engineering word of the day. Hey, this is your engineer, Pius, also becoming a programmer more and more. If you like the engineering word of the day, please support it. I can only do it with donations and listeners, and you can do that at patreon.com/Pios Labs, Pioslabs. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time.